Okay, Joe, ready when you are.
Cool. So the way I'll do it then is I'll move across to the presentation. So like it'll all come up on your screens and I'll start going through everything then. At that point, I can't like see anyone or see you, Sarah. So if you need me to stop or at any point, just give us a shout. So yeah, the first bit's like 45 minutes to an hour, do the presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. So let me just share this. And that should be up for everybody now. So yeah, firstly, my name is Joe Hubbard. I'm a promoter. I'm currently at Futuresound Group, which is in Leeds, and we put gigs on across Yorkshire. I've been a promoter for like full time about 8 years. I put my first gig on about 12, 13 years ago. So I've been doing it a little while. And yeah, this is sort of an artist focused presentation, but I guess anyone interested in music, it should make sense. And it's just, yeah, talking a bit about gigs, promoters, what they do, what they are, and growing your audience as an artist. So first of all, I'll do a little overview of what we're doing. Try to be kind of broad with this. So some of it you might know already, and it might be very obvious things, but then hopefully later on it'll be sort of more advanced things. So we'll start off and I'll talk about what a promoter is and what we do. And then after that, I'll talk about when as an artist it's a good time to approach a promoter in your career. And then after that, I'll talk about local promoters, regional promoters, and national promoters, and sort of the differences between them, what they do, and the advantages and disadvantages of each one. After that, we'll get more into gigging stuff, and we'll talk about support slots and headline gigs and how they differ. Then we'll do a little bit about what promoters look for in an artist, which is it's kind of just my opinion on it, and it's what I look for. Obviously, everyone's a bit different. And then after that, we'll talk about growing your audience with a promoter and how you can work together and how can be sort of a symbiotic relationship where you both help each other to grow. Then after that, I'll do a piece on booking agents, what they are and what they can do for you. Then I'll do a little bit, which I think is quite important, is just sort of my views on what to watch out for, because unreputable promoters and booking agents, because yeah, there's some slightly shady people out there. And then sort of just general tips for growing an artist. Then a bit about networking and what I see is a good way of what's a good way of doing that. And then finally gigging in 2022 and going into 2023. So my first slide is what is the role of a promoter and what do we do? So just generally, it's the person responsible for the overall organization of the gig. So that basically starts at the budgeting process, and that's how like my day starts is working out sort of financial stuff and how much it costs to hire a venue, how much the costs are, especially at the minute, which are all going up, especially on a larger scale and looking into summer 2023. That's sort of a key topic at the minute. And then after that, it's we like approach venues, so the link really between the artist and the venues themselves. So I have like a strong working relationship with lots of venues across Leeds and further afield in Yorkshire. So that's sort of, yeah, we act as that go between, I suppose. It's our job to approach artists, so there's like an A&R element of that we could try and like listen to music, go out and see gigs, try and find new bands and artists and approach them early on and sort of try and start relationships then. As a promoter, we'll then agree the terms between once we've done the budget and we've got the venues and the artists, we'll sort of agree the terms and sort of do the contracts between them. At that point, once the gig's agreed, it's the promoter's role. At least it's on the artist as well, but it's largely the promoter's role to oversee the marketing and what marketing we do, what's appropriate. It's different for every gig. It's different for small gigs and big gigs. Some of it's online focused. Some of it's going out and putting posters up or billboards. So it's overseeing the spend on that and the best way to spend money on that. We'll then deal with inquiries, which especially is like ticketing focused, but just general gig inquiries. So we've got like a phone line at the office, which is people call through if they've got questions and stuff, especially, yeah, as I say, especially ticketing. And then once it gets to the actual gig, kind of on us to deliver the event itself. So after we've organised everything with the venue, seeing it through on the day, making sure it goes off without a hitch. And I'll speak about booking agents later, but there's a vast difference between a promoter and a booking agent, even though on the outside they sound like a similar thing. So next we'll talk about local promoters, regional promoters, and national promoters and the differences between. So your local promoter is putting on shows in one city or town or just one venue, and that'll be your sort of smaller scale stuff, and you're kind of probably all aware of local promoters in each city. And then the sort of slightly larger scale of that is regional promoters, where you might do multiple cities and towns within one area or part of the country. So Futuresound, I would class as a regional promoter because we mainly focused in Yorkshire. We do some little other bits outside of Yorkshire and across the UK, but generally 99% of our gigs take place in Yorkshire. And then the sort of larger scale is a national promoter, where they have shows across the country or across the world. So big national promoters, examples are like Live Nation and AEG. And they're like international companies, so they're partners, do the same thing as a local promoter and regional promoter, but they just do it on a very large scale. All of them can be helpful at different stages in your career. There's not one good one or one bad one. Local promoters generally, I think it's true to say that they have a better understanding of your local area and markets. Like a national promoter are often London based, and they might not understand what's going on in your town and how to market to the people of that place. But the flip side is that national promoters are pretty good in terms that they string a lot of tours together, and they'll put one artist on multiple shows. So once you're looking, we'll get into gigging outside of your town later on, but once you're looking at that, that's a thing that national promoters can be pretty useful for. So yeah, next talking about when to approach a promoter. And any promoters can be helpful as soon as you're ready to perform live. I think that's fully true. So if you're as soon as you're like decided that you've like done your demos and you've got a little bit of traction and you're like, right, I want to get out and start gigging, I would say at that point a promoter is going to be your best way to get into the scene and get out and actually play some gigs. I think it's an important point to say that good promoters engage in regular conversation to help form your plan. That's especially true early on. If you get a good promoter on your side, I would say it's probably going to be a local promoter at this stage. If you get a good local promoter on your side, then they're going to be able to help you like from the off, and they're going to be able to help make your plan. And you might be a bit like, I think a lot of like artists when they start out get a bit excited and they're just like, oh, we'll just play every gig, we'll just do everything, and it's sometimes not the best thing to do. And a good promoter at that point will kind of discuss with you what a healthier way of approaching that start of your career might be. Just a personal tip for me is it's good to work with multiple promoters at an early stage. Don't ever commit. So find your like local promoter that you like, but also get to know the other local promoters, and especially if they're putting on music that aligns with you and your art, and just speak to multiple people. There's no need. Some people will try and convince you that like they're the only person worth speaking to and worth knowing, but it's good to sort of spread out, and when you're early on, it'll help you pick up as many good gigs as you can if you talk to multiple promoters. As you get on a bit, you don't have to work with a promoter for every show. You can put on your own. I think it's good to mention that, because it's not, I don't want to say it's the be all and end all working with a promoter. Like some artists do choose to promote their own gigs if they've got someone in the band or a manager who's pretty savvy with stuff, then they might try and put their own on. I think that's especially useful with local gigs. Once you get to a certain stage, which we'll come to, that you can put on a headline gig in your local town, it's sometimes good to self-promote because you know that area just as well as any promoter's going to. Yeah, in terms of what to do and what to have in place before you actually approach a promoter, a rough plan, that's really important. If you just start trying to gig with like no direction, then it often doesn't. It often just means you waste quite a lot of time just because you've like done the wrong things, or you should have. If you just sit down and make a plan of like where you're at to what you want to do with your act, where you want to get to, if it's a hobby or if you want to do it as a career, and just have like a vague plan and a vague aim. It'll help you make the decisions that you're going to end up having to make pretty soon into it. If you're using social media, like have the pages ready. Like if you like get some things posted on them so that it's like you've already got some traction, get people to follow them. Like it's helpful if you've already demonstrated that you're willing to, that you've got a bit of a fan base or at least an audience through the work that you've already done. That's pretty helpful to have before. Recorded music is really helpful if you can. Like it's a decent demo, or like if you get into a studio and play something down, it's just obviously it's the first thing that as somebody that as a new act, it's the only thing you can go for really, because you're not doing gigs. So all you can really do to get yourself across is have some decent recorded music that represents you. Sometimes you get people sending like, oh, this is my old band, or this is what we used to sound like, but it's going to be better next time. And it's kind of just better to just get that out of the way first and already have some good music that you're proud of when you approach a promoter. The release plan's really important. A lot of promoting is based around, I would say, like matching up your live sets with a release plan. And that kind of sounds like advanced and something you do later on, but even from the off, it's like if you have a single coming out a couple of weeks before you play, then you'll release that single, and then that single will pick up some traction online, and then you can get those people to come to the gig in 2 weeks' time. So it's always good to have your next song ready. That's not just a live tip. That's like the whole, I would say, starting out as an artist, if the first thing you're going to ask if you get some interest from a label or a manager is, can we hear more music? It's just always the first thing they ask. And so it's good to have your next one ready. At least a demo of that would be fine. Live videos are really great. They're the next thing I would look for when a band or artist approaches me. It's if you're going to be putting them on in a live setting, then it's helpful to know what they look and sound like in that live setting. So if you've got any examples of that, like a little acoustic session you've done or a video from a gig, it's helpful to share that. I've put here that a manager is really helpful, and that doesn't mean that you need to be signed to some giant music mogul management company that know everybody. It's more just having somebody when you start speak on your behalf. It's kind of just better for everyone to go through a filter, because sometimes if your act, especially if there's more than one person in your act, I would say that sometimes they set up like an email address and different people are saying different things, and a manager is just somebody that sits in the middle and collates all the thoughts of the artist and passes them on to the people that they're speaking to. So I say generally it's kind of nice for promoters or any external party to go through a manager. The next thing I would say on the list, I've got local support slots. So it's basically everyone starts with local supports. They're the most achievable gigs to get when you start. Local support slots are good because they're low pressure. It's not on you to bring all the audience down, and it's like a good place to learn your craft without having like the high pressure of doing a headline gig. It's less costly than touring. It's like obviously it's like cost of living at the minute is hard and fuel prices are expensive, and the cheapest way you can do a gig is doing it in your hometown. So it's a perfect place to start in terms of that. And as I just said, like practice live and earn your craft. That's what you do. That's what everybody does at local sports slots. You sort of build it up through doing half a dozen of them. By the time you've like gone, learn how to play live, learn how it all works with the sound engineers and advancing gigs and things like that, it means that when it comes to going further afield, you're already well set up with all that. It's a great way to develop your audience. You're playing to new people, so you might play to some of your own fans, but you're also playing to fans of other artists, which is ideal in terms of picking up new fans for yourself. So you would always like push, if you're doing a support slot, you would always push that fact to the other audience members. This is a really big one. It's opportunity to meet similar artists further along in their career. So it's by support. If you support a bigger artist who's on tour, try it and you can get to know them and speak to them. And then it's going to be an easy way to learn a lot from them. And it's often a way that you end up getting invited to do tour supports, which we'll come on to. So you can kind of even down to like looking at like my friends in bands always look at their touring acts as support, looking at like their pedal boards and like gear setups and stuff like that. And and it can be, yeah, it's sort of just good to shadow those sorts of artists. With local support slots, it's only important to only take appropriate offers. I think this will come up later on in the sort of talks about the sort of behaviour to watch out for, but like, you don't have to take any gig that's offered to you. Once you've done a couple of gigs in your local area, you'll probably see more get offered to you, and just take that. It's not just financial either. It's like, take the ones that are actually going to be helpful, that are going to do the things that we just talked about above, because not all of them will. Yeah, this is a way of getting local support slots, is look out at local listings, follow promoters and approach them for gigs you'd like to support on. There's nothing I like more as a promoter than a band coming to me and saying, can I support this act you've got on this date? Like, it's when it's an act just saying, we'll promote any slot, or we'll play with any band. It's good, and like, I do make a note and I would come back to you, but if somebody's shown an interest in supporting an artist, then it kind of shows to me that they're driven and they understand where they want to be. And it's most of the acts that I would say at the minute that book as local supports, they've approached about the artist directly. Go to local shows, meet people, find out you can direct. That's, I know it's tough to get out and stuff, and it's on like evenings all the time, but the more that you're at the shows and that you want to be playing, the more chance you've got of developing that. Oh, I currently can't see what's underneath that. Remind you how to start small and build up. Oh yeah, that's just don't expect to walk into the academy in Leeds and be like, oh, can I support this person? Like, it's generally, promoters will work with bands from early on in the career, and they will, if you've done like, generally you will favour artists that have done a couple of smaller support slots and proven themselves and got better. Then you would put them on the biggest things that you can, but nobody really just walks into those like 2,000 plus capacity gigs. So I just say that's something to bear in mind, that if you can just get a few small ones to start off, it's still kind of the best way of doing it. Support slots further afield, so this would be like outside of your town or city. Once you've done some local support slots, go and explore and get out of the city. It's kind of the logical next step. And if you can do that and support other artists rather than trying your own headline tour, there's a lot of benefits to that. Free entry nights and regular gig nights are useful. I would say there's less of them than there used to be. Like, back when I started promoting, it was kind of every city had some like regular nights that were always good to play. There's sort of less of that, which probably for many reasons, but there's still some really good ones out there. I'm from Hull. There's a really good night in Hull called the Sesh that's free entry every Tuesday night, and it's always busy. And if you put one touring band on a week generally, and if you can go and play that gig, it's great. And there is more versions of that around the UK. That's sort of that'd be a real aim once you've done some local sets, to go and do that. A good way of doing that is similar artists and see where they're playing. That's literally just go online. You should be able to find any band's listings. I'm sure, as unique as an artist you might be, you've probably got influences of other bands, and it's good to look at them and look at your peers and see what gigs they're playing. And generally, that's the format everybody follows. And engage with promoters in those areas as well. Send through your stuff to them and try and get some conversations going with promoters in those cities. But when you do that, be realistic about your worth, because sometimes you might get a bit excited because you've done some local sets and you brought 50 people down. You might have had a really good night, but that doesn't mean you can bring 50 people down when you're playing like 100 miles away. So don't tell promoters that you can, because although you might get the gig in the first place, it'll probably just spoil a relationship if you've sort of over exaggerated. Yeah, good way of getting support slots in other towns is if you have got a fan base in. So that if you've got like, you might even have family or friends, or that a few people will come down and see you. Let the other promoters there. Let the promoters there know. And if you can prove that with data, which can be done through Spotify and Facebook and Instagram, generally, you can. Often when I'm getting pitched artists, I'll often get told like, "Oh, Leeds is our second biggest Spotify city outside of London," and it kind of like that is pretty useful, and it sells yourself pretty well. Tour support's can be super useful. Probably like that. I think it's like the golden egg getting a tour support. You go out, it's low pressure. probably playing with a big band. You're learning lots from them. They're also the hardest thing to get, sadly, because everybody wants to do tour supports. The way that they come through is direct relationships. Generally, like often it's not even promoters that can. Sometimes it's promoters that can help, but often it's actually having a relationship with artists themselves, which sort of come from that second point really. And without that, it's pretty tough. So yeah, develop relationships with other artists and promoters and venues to try and sort of put yourself in the best position if a tour spot ever comes up. Yeah, touring can be expensive, so only take on shows that have value to you. That it costs a lot. It costs a lot of money to go and play in other cities, and it takes a lot of time, and it's time you could be spent doing other things. There are some nights that aren't really worth doing, so it's sort of good to try and work that out before you take any opportunities further afield, because there's nothing worse than driving across the country and playing to 3 people, then to drive back. Local headline shows. At this point, you've gained a bit of traction through support slots, and you're ready to do headline gigs. So at this point, if you've done a few sets, promoters are willing to book you on a headline. So hopefully you should know that promoter. But if you don't, and you think you're at the point of putting a headline gig, you can still talk to them, because they're presumably by that point you have an audience and you've got some proven data. In terms of what promoter to work with for your headline shows, look at similar artists, a bit like we mentioned in the last slide. Find out their promoters. You can always find out who promoters are pretty easily. Usually they plaster the name on the poster, but it's also listed on Facebook and most ticketing websites say who the promoter is, so it should be pretty easy to find out. Have all your worth ready, so like previous ticket sales, social numbers, anything you can do to prove that you're worth tickets and you've established a fan base. Have that ready, and that's going to mean that when you approach various promoters, you're going to be able to all of a sudden you've gone from asking for slots to them asking you to play, so you've sort of built some demand up there, so prove it as best you can. Yeah, as I've just mentioned that, but only work with promoters you value, work with the right ones. Like if you're at a point where you can sell tickets, promoters are going to want to work with you generally, so you've got bargaining power there. So if you've got the data to prove it, then it's sort of in your court. And a good thing to do in terms of choosing promoters is find out what they can do in long term. So a lot of promoters might just put on headline gigs in that one venue, and it might be great playing that venue, and you might want to do it once or twice, but at some point, if you do want to progress your career, you're going to have to get away from that. So if you can kind of like pick a promoter that can offer you something else, then usually it's kind of worth doing that. So a lot of like how like I do my job at the minute is that, well, when I'll work with artists, and rather than just doing headline gigs, we can look at like festivals down the line and stuff. And it's not just Futuresound that can do that. There's other promoters can do that, but that's an important thing to look for. This is what the people that I work with look for in an artist. Organized. If you can prove those things that I've said about earlier in the presentation, you're already off to a winner, really, because some things come through and through my email or the call up, and it's like if you seem disorganized at that point, then it's going to be tough going forward. Keen and passionate, that usually comes across you can usually get that across again via a phone call or email. That's something personally that kind of stands out to me, and you can kind of see that. Info and data to back up the claims. I know I mentioned data a few times now, but it is really helpful, even if it's just I have this many followers on Instagram, and I've got this, and I played to this many people at a gig last week, and having somebody I guess it's another part of organisation, but if somebody's organised enough to come up with that, then usually it means they're going to be something that you want to work with. Good music, again, like I mentioned earlier, that's the key thing really, is having good music, and not that there should be pressure on to have like amazing studio recordings at the start of your career. So I'm not expecting that, but just a half decent demo of what you sound like is very helpful. So, and if it sounds good, then that's something I obviously look for. Then I would mirror for all promoters. Strong socials if relevant. I know not every genre is relevant to have social media, and people can harp on about it quite a lot when it's not the most important thing. But if you are if you are sort of an artist that's targeted at a demographic who is big on social media, then I'm probably going to look at the numbers on your socials. Working with a promoter to grow your audience. So this slide hopefully explains sort of the importance of what we've talked about and why it's a good thing to work with a promoter. So yeah, it's in a promoter's interest to work with you long term and grow your audience together. So it's not just, it should be a two-way relationship. It shouldn't just be that you want some help, so you want to work with a promoter to help you. It should be that the promoter wants to work with you, so that you can kind of both work together, and in the end, it'd be better off for it. Promoters can put you on bigger bet slots the more you work together. That's literally how it works with me all the time, and everyone at our company really. The artists that we've worked with at a smaller level and grown together are the ones that will get prioritized for playing on festivals. Experienced promoters should help you with advice. You shouldn't be afraid to like speak to them about stuff, being able to like jump on the phone and say, ask for their opinion. Like it should, again, it should be a two-way thing. The promoter should be very understanding of local marketing and everything, and you should be able to tap into that. So it's important to work together. The promoter's going to have a lot of data from ticketing and things like that they can reach out to, and they're going to have social followings, and if you've got a good relationship with your promoter, you should be able to tap into that for when you come to do gigs together. Yeah, when you've secured a gig, when you work with a promoter, just keep asking about further opportunities. It's important to know how you can grow with your promoter and where you can get to, and what they can offer you in the long term. So don't be afraid to ask. It's actually more helpful when people do ask. Yeah, so I just went across that. Promoters have data and access to audiences to help you grow further. That's mailing lists, social media, presence at the actual gigs through like poster sites and things like that, like physical marketing as well. So I'll now talk about booking agents, which is much different to promoters, but they're a very important part of going from local musician who's sold a few tickets to making it into a career, really. At the point where you can sell tickets and you want to tour, like having a booking agent is at that point is what's going to take you on to like the next steps in your career. So a booking agent is responsible for organising your live career. So they don't get involved in your records, they don't get involved in managing you. They literally look after like any public live performances that you're doing. So they liaise with promoters to book your shows. Booking agents are who I speak to all day. I speak to local bands who don't have booking agents or booking agents. They're my main two contacts, and they're the people that get your gigs for you. A good booking agent, and there are lots of good booking agents in the world and country. And a good one will help create your live plan to fit around your music release plan. So they'll sit down. They won't just book you on random gigs. They'll sit down with you and they'll be like, let's focus on doing a tour of main cities on this month, and then when your album's out, and then in between the album cycle, let's go out and play some towns that you might not have played before and try and build a bit of an audience in those. Because it's quite complex. I mean, even as a promoter, I'm not as understanding as booking agents and managers are of how you fit a gig around a release plan. So that's like their expertise, really. Yeah, booking agents is your key to getting festival slots, big tour supports, and other big opportunities you would struggle to alone. Sadly, without a booking agent, you're always going to struggle to get those opportunities at that level. And that's mainly because the booking agents have a lot of bargaining power, and sadly that's the way it works at that level. Once you've got a good booking agent, like you're kind of winning, really. So if you can use all the things we've already talked about to get one, then that's how you take a next big step in your career. Yeah, all that being said, for how good they are, you don't want to get one too early. So you just like pick the right time for you to approach and sign one. Don't just jump into the first person you hear from. It's not something you need early on. You should be able to do all your local support. You should be able to do your local support gigs, maybe even do your local headline gigs, and do some odd touring without a booking agent. So you should do all that before you pick a booking agent. Like I wouldn't. It's not your first priority. I would say your first priority is sort of getting your music out there and doing some small gigs on your own, and then you sort of build your demand, and then you can turn to booking agents, and you'll be able to probably have a choice of them by that stage. Unreputable promoters and booking agents. So I think this is sort of like my personal opinions on this slide, and it's not like hard and fast rule. There's probably like there's people that argue different ways, but this is what I see as like kind of shady behaviour and unnecessary behaviour really that you don't have to put up with. Yeah, not everyone's helpful. Some can be more harm than good. So a good promoter won't ever ask you for money up front to pay to play. Thankfully, this is something that seems to be getting stamped out, but it used to definitely be a thing where it would, especially there was a lot of like London promoters, and you'd really get caught in this actually when you'd done your local gigs and you wanted to start touring and you wanted to go out and do supports in other cities and play nights in other cities. I used to get caught with this a bit as like when I used to manage bands, and they will say like, oh, if you pay us £100 for 20 tickets and then you can sell the tickets on. And like that's just wrong. Like it's the promoter and artist should be responsible for pushing the gig and getting people to buy tickets, but the customer should buy that ticket from the ticketing website. Like it shouldn't be, they shouldn't be buying them off. You shouldn't have already paid for that ticket to sell on. They should be buying it at the point of that. The bills that put on should make sense and flow. You often see, it's not to say every band on the bill needs to sound the same, because I think that's boring, but you shouldn't have like a heavy rock band followed by like a soft folk band and then a rapper, like, which if somebody's doing that, then it's probably just because they're doing a pay to play thing and it's not too well thought out. Look for live footage of the event. So this is when you come to pick a promoter or a booking agent. Look at who they work with. Look at the actual events. Like if you go on the Futuresound website, there's tons of photos from events that we've put on, and every promoter that can put on decent events should have that. It doesn't mean they have to be big, massive gigs in fields, but there should be pictures of like busy rooms and happy people. Yeah, just check their website, socials and listings. If the promoter contacts you, or if anyone contacts you, really, if anyone, just go on the website straight away and you'll get a good judge from that. Go on the socials, go on the listings and see what other artists they put on. If they don't put on anyone that you remotely align with or are interested in, I think you sound like, then maybe it's not right for you. Yeah, if you're suspicious, take a look. This is if you're suspicious, take a look at what else they worked with and see if you recognise them and reach out to them. That's just, yeah, if you're thinking that maybe this doesn't feel right, or maybe you've gone on the website and you've gone on the live footage and it all looks a bit dodgy, look who else they've worked with, and if you know anyone, or even if you don't, just reach out and just message and be like, oh, hey, I've seen you've worked with X promoter in X city. How did it go for you? Did you would you recommend them, and try and get a vibe off that. A booking agent should never take money up front and should be on a percentage cut. That's just completely standard from any like reputable booking agent, from people representing brand new bands to people representing Ed Sheeran. Like they only take a percentage cut. They don't ask for money up front. Some, like, I've seen things on like Facebook groups and stuff where people have called out unreputable booking agents who've asked for money to book your band, but that shouldn't be done. It's kind of because it's in their interest. So it should be a percentage deal because it's in their interest to get you better money and more gigs. So they should get a percentage of that. Networking and creating opportunities. Go to shows, especially ones relevant to you. So go to your like local nights and stuff, and or gigs out of town. And if it's relevant to your scene, especially go and speak to the band. And it's hard to do this. Like I'm not skimming over it. Like, takes a lot of courage, but if you can just manage to bump into artists and have a chat with them, then that's kind of the best way that you will create opportunities. Yeah, and yeah, that comes with engaging with your local scene, go into gigs near you, look for familiar faces. Like most of the time you'll start going to gigs and you'll be like a little bit freaked out and it feels a bit scary, but then eventually you'll like see the same people, and then you'll get chatting eventually and realize that actually everyone's in the same boat. And yeah, I'd say that's a good way to network. Follow everyone on socials, just any social you have, Facebook or whatever, Instagram. Just if you just create like a little, you don't even if you don't use social media, just create one just to follow other like promoters and artists, and just have it so you can like go on your feed and scroll through. I mean, see what's going on. I mean, my socials are some sort of weird mix of my friends and my work like things, but just make one just for your artist or your band, and use it to look through and research. When you play a concert, stick around. That's kind of a key one. I know sometimes it's hard if you've like got work in the morning or whatever. But if you can stay around for a bit and chat to people, especially if you're supporting somebody else, just it's there. Yeah, just chat to them. They're in the same boat as you. Sell your merch after as well. That's always a good tip. Just I think people think of selling merch as especially on small gigs, sort of pointless, or thinking, oh well, I won't make much money, or I might not even sell anything. But even if you don't sell anything, it becomes a focal point for you to chat to people. So you'll get other artists coming to talk to you. You might get the promoter coming to talk to you. You just got a little place where you can stand and chat to people with some t-shirts behind you, then kind of onto a winner. Yeah, befriend similar artists. There's a lot of like petty competition sometimes in certain scenes more than others. But just befriend artists, and don't see them as a competition. Don't see that only one artist from your town can go on to do anything. It's like really you'll see that once an artist once one artist sort of breaks out from a scene, the everyone or the industry starts looking at that scene and being like, oh, who sounds like them from that area? So it's kind of a good thing to just help each other rather than being against each other. Music industry networking events. There's lots of these. There's a lot you don't have to go down south. There's a lot in the north. Like there's and they're kind of geared at artists and people that work in the music industry to go and network. And I don't really like the term networking events, but that's what they are. And it is really daunting. And I remember like when I first used to go to them, I used to like be terrified but you soon sort of work yourself out and find your feet, and you actually realize that most people in music that are at those events, that are willing to go to those events, are probably quite nice to talk to, and you'll find that they'll have the same interests as you, and that's eventually you'll get opportunities from doing that. Yeah, try and time your pitches at the same time above. That's just what I've written. If I've received an email and then I bump into the person at one of these networking events, it's kind of like that advertising thing. Like you see something 2 or 3 times and it starts to make sense. So I would if you plan on going to something like that, then there's like Long Division in Wakefield's a good one where it's kind of artist focused. Like send out your email, so when you do bump into people, you've got something to talk about. And then finally, I've done a bit of gigging post-COVID and what it is at the minute, because obviously the world's changed a little bit. I'd say there's generally ticket sales were really tough. They're kind of getting a little bit better now, but live music was a sort of toughly hit industry through it all. So yeah, I would say like slightly different, but like trying to look at the positive of it. There are some opportunities that come up. There's been a real resetting of live market. I think that's generally a thing that we're seeing the effects of now, really, that through COVID people were less able to meet up and create music together, and it means that it's kind of for once there's like a lack of new artists, and they're starting to come through slightly now, but it's actually a really good time to sort of reset, like put out like new music after the pandemic, and it's sort of it's like a bit of clear space and an opportunity to put your music out into where it's not so oversaturated like it was before. We still see cancellations all the time, especially on sport artists, and it's not just because they have COVID, but there's now just more of in a good way, there's more of an acceptance that if you're ill or if you're not feeling up to it, you shouldn't have to go out and still play gigs, and that means that slots are opening up and not getting filled a lot of the time. So if you just keep in contact with promoters and just say, is there any last minute slots? I mean, going into the end of this month in December is not a busy touring time, but from like February through, like just keep in contact, and you might end up getting like a bigger gig just from the fact that you're local and you're able to jump on it. Yeah, so that's the end. I'll come back and see you now.